Hey, it's John Reed. I'm live at AdvoCamp. I've commandeered another really lovely room. Joseph Jaffe, this is a really nice surroundings we're in, huh?
We are 20,000 leagues under the sea, I think, in a dungeon.
It feels that way. A very nondescript hotel room, but we're at a very interesting event called AdvoCamp, which is this burgeoning field of advocate marketing. You were the keynote, and I'm reading off your bio here that you are one of the most sought after consultants, speakers, and thought leaders on innovation marketing, new media, and social media. Well, that's a mouthful.
Right. It also means that I wrote my own bio. So,
Yeah.
I've spoken in 32 countries. I think Slovenia this year will make it 33.
Nice.
So I get around.
Yeah, and you've been in the headlines a little bit yourself by some sort of commentary on Trump and how Trump fits into some of your theories about zero. Zero is a super interesting concept, and you hit on that a lot in your keynote. So maybe we could kind of go there first and see where this takes us.
Yeah, well, I mean, we'll take a step back. And in my third book, Flip the Funnel, I wrote about 3 case studies. One was USAA, one was Zappos, and one was Obama '08. And the central premise behind Flip the Funnel is retention becomes the new acquisition, how to use existing customers to gain new ones.
Right.
And so at the time, candidate or presidential hopeful Obama mobilized his advocates and activated them to, volunteer, knock on doors, really take an active role and interest in creating that movement.
Right.
In some respects, one might say that's what's been happening with Bernie Sanders. But then I realized, having written Zero paid media as the new marketing model, in a perfect world, why would you need to spend a dime buying attention if you were paying attention?
Right.
But also this idea of, earned media in this particular case being the be-all, being this incredible amplifier. Put differently, we rent media, but we own assets.
Right.
So Zero becomes an acronym for zealots, entrepreneurship, retention, and owned assets. And isn't it better to be a landlord versus a tenant, to own and monetize your own marketing? So I realized, and I've I joke, which is when I wrote my article and then in this keynote, if you really want to know what I think about Trump, just go to my Facebook page.
Right.
It's pretty obvious.
Yeah.
But without passing judgment, one has to just look and say, this phenom, this incredible rise, where almost, any rhetoric or vitriol seems to just kind of, bounce off him and be completely deflected. This is a quintessential case study for Zero paid media as the new marketing model. Now, what I will say is, the Z of zealots is really the cornerstone of Trump's marketing push, knowingly or unknowingly, wittingly or unwittingly. And what I did say in my keynote today is zealotry, if you will, versus advocacy. The zealot is the spark, is
right.
that ignites potentially the raging forest fire. But advocacy is the vessel that contains the fire, that
Right.
channels the fire, that focuses the fire, and that keeps the fire burning, and ensures that the spark and the passion endures. Will Trump become the president? Most people still don't believe, but less people than don't
Right.
believe than at the beginning. But I think I think we have to just, if not give credit where it's due, just at least make the observation that this is Zero paid media as the new marketing model in effect and in action.
I remember huddling with some European colleagues, very smart observers who were incredulous that Trump was going to get anywhere. And I tried to explain to them, and I wasn't really totally onto what you're onto, but I could see that he was able to step into the media circus and essentially manipulate the media rather than sort of, most people, it's like, oh, I said something objectionable. Now I got to go through the shame spank tunnel and apologize. And he just managed to move way beyond that and sort of have these people sort of in the palm of his hand. And that was what I thought was going to start carrying it. Because as you point out, all those people are carrying your message. You're not paying for that.
Yeah. And there really is content and context associated with Trump as a, almost like as a social anthropological experiment, if you will. But, I think one of the interesting things is, and I said this in my keynote, I've done a lot of work with companies like Satmetrics, Net Promoter Score. I'm a big fan of Net Promoter Score. And the fact that they statistically could prove and create this correlation between the answer to just one simple question, how likely are you to recommend to a friend or family member, or whatever the case may be, and link that to profitability. But the thing is, even, Joe Chernov just said it beautifully now. He said, don't collect advocates, like they're data points or that they're all equal. And I kind of made a similar point, which is I almost dissected promoters or advocates. And I said, well, what if instead of detractors, passives, and promoters, what if you could apply that same lens to promoters? And so created this idea of detractor promoters, which are called defectors, passive promoters, which are called dormants, and then promoter promoters, which are the zealots. So yes, every single company, B2B, B2C, small business, medium business, large enterprise, every single one of them has to be able to activate their advocates.
Right.
But the place to begin, arguably, is the zealot, is, literally and figuratively, your customer that is prepared to permanently tattoo your brand on their body. As I said, the zealot, the religious zealot, fell on their swords and drew their own blood for what they believed in, their passion.
Yeah.
And so isn't that a tattoo, drawing your own blood for something you believe in?
It is the ultimate. I mean, obviously with certain brands like Harley Davidson, you can trace those tattoos back a long time, but for the most part, that doesn't happen. I remember writing many years ago, I actually called him a corporate whore at the time, but it was an individual, pardon the language, listeners, but it was the individual who tattooed a polo on his chest. He kind of made waves at the time because no one had thought of this notion of sort of self-branding corporate brands, but in a way it is an analogy for what you're talking about. Like, those are the people that are going to go the extra mile for you. And what I think for the listeners who aren't here, I think this category of advocate marketing, I think what they're trying to change, see what you think about this. I think they're trying to systematize it more, right? So that you've always had in certain brands these passionate people, but they were just kind of out there, and they might say something from time to time, but you never really pulled them in and said, hey, we want to recognize you. We want to get you further involved. So that seems to be what this is all about, right?
Right. And look, you've got this is almost a cocktail for competitive advantage and differentiation and success. And it's part advocacy and part influence and part customer service. Jay Baer spoke about hugging your haters. They're all pieces of the same puzzle. And when you connect and link them together, it's very powerful output and outcome. And so, in my keynote, I also spoke about this idea of companies need to have a plan and a policy in place. I'm glad I'm not too close to the mic with all those P's. Yeah. To be able to deliver programs. There's another P, to your 80-20, to your power customers. The 20 or the 12 or the 10% of your customers responsible for a disproportionate amount of your revenue. Right. Then, and let's call that customer centricity. Then you've got influence, which is the 1% of humans responsible for 99% of your buzz, from bloggers and external bloggers. But it's where those two overlap, the Venn diagram in the middle, the people that buy you a lot, your customers who are also influential and talk about you a lot to a lot of people. And my point was twofold. One, if they have a voice, well, get the hell out of the way and let them talk. If they don't have a voice, turn the funnel into a megaphone. But then I followed that up with this point, which is your most credible spokespeople are your employees, and your most persuasive salespeople are your customers. So if you can actually implement against that, both from an employee-centric and a customer-centric perspective, that is as close to the silver bullet of marketing as we will ever get to. And I joke that Flip the Funnel, my third book, is the best book I'll ever write. even though I've written 4 and hope to write more.
Right.
Because I just think, is it the best? Well, it's like a child, right? You never have a favorite child. You love them all equally, but differently. And Zero, in truth, extends a lot of this thinking and actually is better thinking because some seeds are planted in Flip and Funnel I've been allowed to nurture and expand on. But I've got to just keep coming back to this idea that, without our customers and our employees, we are nothing and we have nothing. So everything else is just window dressing.
Right. But isn't this message still pretty disruptive to a lot of marketing folks? I mean, I got to tell you, I deal with a lot of marketers. If you, like what you said yesterday, you said in a perfect world, the paid media ad budget would be 0. That would still blow a lot of people's minds as of today, in my view.
And we've seen it, though. I mean, Trump was an extreme example today, but there's so many examples. Jeff Bezos, one of the most famous examples where he cut his entire television ad budget to 0, and he moved all of that money into free shipping into his customers. That's ground zero in a sense. That was the moment, or one of the moments, where we actually saw, I think, an inflection point, a tipping point for Amazon that put them on the map and created, sometimes I say in my keynotes or my workshops, what's your Amazon.com moment? Because that was a moment for Jeff Bezos. And then on other fronts, when we look at, I had one slide today that said, start a customer movement. But in other presentations, I actually talk about start a customer MO-VE movement because I use Movember as a case study. Again, 0 paid media. And you can see, or the Ice Bucket Challenge, 2 examples in a certain category, but demonstrating the power of 0. And, obviously we say, well, that's great, but what about, the software business, or what about, banking? And the reality is there are lots of examples across the board where companies are maybe not decreasing because the point was, and it's right there in your statement, in a perfect world. Well, the world is not perfect, which means we're going to continue to have ad budgets. But isn't it a better place to start, in terms of the authentic air we breathe, the water we drink, what is natural, human to human, as Cisco's calling it now? That seems to be a better place to start, and a more authentic, more credible, and certainly a more efficient place because of the low initial investment. And I'll say one more thing, which is, we spend money on prospects, on acquisition, on, as I call it, strangers and prostitutes. We invest our money in our customers and in these customer-centric ecosystems and in customer service, customer experience, and ultimately advocacy, because it is an investment.
You also said another catchphrase from your keynote was, instead of paying for attention, start paying attention.
Just pay attention, yeah.
What does that mean, the pay attention part?
Well, it means everywhere around us there are moments, again, let's use that phrase, moments, where a customer says something and we don't respond, or we ignore them, or a suggestion comes in, or we just haven't created systems that allow us to capitalize on creativity, suggestions, or turn haters into lovers, to use Jay's thought or thought process, which is based on very solid marketing theory that says, a customer that's very dissatisfied with you, if you can turn them around, will not only become loyal, but they'll become your most loyal customers. So paying attention versus paying for attention is paying attention to your customers in general, is paying attention to your employees. But it's also those moments. And, I don't want to have to use the Oreo Super Bowl tweet in terms of, because it's not that. It's not just about real-time marketing or speculative or, opportunistic marketing, because it's still the concept of marketing from an acquisition and a reach and an awareness standpoint. Paying attention is a moment to connect to surprise, to delight, to serve. I think Joe Chernov spoke about that idea, and he said the best leaders are servants. What a great concept when it comes to brands being servants, and actually flipping the concept of being corporate-centric, customer-centric, by definition means you are a servant. I play with words a lot, like the word cult, lives in the word culture. But the other thing is customer service or servicing customers, right? Flip the words around. And if you talk about customer service, why not public service? Why not providing a public service to your public? Why not be a public servant? The example of Dove's campaign for real beauty, to me, was a public service. It was an example of customer service, because the opposite of service is disservice. And we do our customers a disservice when we lie to them, when we exaggerate, when we use hyperbole and generalizations to mislead them and to try and con them into a sale. So paying attention is wake up and smell the tea leaves and recognize what is real and what is fake.
Right. But isn't there a little bit of a dark side to this aspect? I mean, you're preaching to the choir to a large extent, because all my ventures, our latest venture, Diginomica, we've paid maybe, I think, $60 in paid marketing, a couple of Facebook ad experiments, and we've been able to establish ourselves within our enterprise domain solely on the basis of essentially earning attention, which I love as a model of like, I have to earn your attention, I have to earn your trust. And when I share value with you, then we start to create a relationship and all things are possible. And I love that model, but the dark side to me, you use Trump as sort of, in a sense, one example of validating your thinking, but there seems to be kind of a herd or mob mentality that can develop around this as well that is a little bit alarming. I mean, I've seen it on the Sanders side as well to some extent, which is you get these people, your zealots in a sense, these throngs of people. I don't see a real high signal conversation. I see a lot of anger. I see a lot of noise. Isn't there a downside to this?
In the political context, one might say that Obama's campaign was built on love, certainly built on hope, and Trump's has been built on hate or anger, let's say. So yes, does it make one right and one wrong? Subjectively, of course, but it depends on whose side of the fence you sit on. That's why I said...
Well, we can take an even more extreme example. When in Mark's opening keynote, he talked about how ISIS have been extremely adept at using these tools. And I thought that was pretty gutsy for him to bring that into the conversation, but I think it's something that has to be reckoned with.
Well, what I'll say is, first of all, there is a fine line between love and hate. And the zealot is... in many respects, I use an extreme example to then triangulate and be able to kind of back off from, in terms of saying, well, that's if you understand the framework, then you can operate pretty liberally inside the framework. But you've got to know where the boundaries are and where the borders are. Otherwise, how far is too far? So the zealot loves you until they don't, and then they hate you.
Right.
And the more they love you, the more you stand to lose if you betray them, in a sense, if you let them down. So that's the important point here, which is so the question is, in a perfect world right now, one has to be said, and again, trying not to take sides, but what I will say is zealotry in of itself, as an end unto itself, is unsustainable. It cannot survive, which is why I showed that 5,000 years of civilizations have all crumbled. There isn't one Ottoman, Ming, Roman, even Nazi Germany. You look at all of these dynasties, they all rose and they all fell. And so I think the takeaway here is the zealot has to be housed and not controlled, but has to be kind of focused through something that is a little bit more mainstream in this case, or more grounded, and that is advocacy itself. So the initiative, the call to action, so to make this grounded for people listening, is how do you activate the advocates? Well, you do that by formalizing and scaling advocacy. You've got to create a program. You've got to have process. You've got to have some methodology. You've got to have community. These are things that, in a way, it can be raw and unfiltered and unstructured to a point, but it is not scalable and it is not sustainable if it cannot be ultimately focused and harnessed and mainstreamed in a sense.
Right, and this isn't a commercial for Influitive, but I think the point of this event is that there should be companies that help customers to systematize this and manage it more, because you make a really good point, which is you think in the Web 2.0 sort of context of all these companies that aroused our passions and our loyalties and then ultimately brutally disappointed us, either because they couldn't sustain their business model. I think of a company like Delicious, where I'm still kind of hanging on, but I'm so bitter about some of the things they've done, or even Twitter, when Twitter changes things like its algorithm or its API and alienates developers. And the point being like that there's fallout there if you can't follow through on that passion in a way that earns the trust. Is that where you're getting at?
Yeah, I mean, wow, Delicious. That is a blast from the past. I haven't heard that name in ages. But yeah, I mean, what I did with Flip the Funnel is, so I took the traditional funnel, which goes from wide to narrow, and then my flipped funnel, which is narrow to wide, and then I connected them and I created the marketing bow tie.
Yeah.
And the marketing bow tie, I've been told, is the first complete marketing framework from acquisition through retention and ultimately loyalty that has ever been created. If you think about it, there isn't another framework that says from A to B via C or from A to B to C. And when I look at the bow tie, there are a couple of interesting points. One, it's not a well-tied bow tie, because ultimately the vision is that the flipped funnel should be bigger than the traditional funnel, because of the long-term efficacy and optimization that will take place. But the bow tie is very zen. So on the left, which is acquisition, for most elements of sales and marketing, awareness, etc., are the promises you make. But on the right side are the promises you keep. On the left side is what you say. On the right side is what you do. On the left side is a production budget. On the right side is a human budget. And ultimately, as you keep going from exploit to explore, what you realize is making good on our promises. I mean, first of all, again, it's like, as I said, this is common sense. If you make a promise, keep a promise. The second part to that's the most basic element. The next element is, it's always better to under-promise and over-deliver, at least versus over-promising and under-delivering. You probably don't want to, intentionally always under-promise in order to over-deliver, but that's a lot better than the opposite. And so you can actually almost put together these rules of engagement that say, this is what is totally unacceptable for us as a company. And every company is different. That's why, as I said, the equation, involves this customer-centric ecosystem and employee-centric ecosystem powered by technology, is designed to connect the dots between employee and employee, between employer and customer, and ultimately between customer and customer. And the real winners will be the ones that not only can do that, but they can create these free, the fluid and loosely controlled conduits where people connect with other people without being monitored or spanked if they get out of line, or penalized if they take too much time on a phone call to solve a problem, or moderated or censored, or whatever the case may be. Those are the kinds of business systems that require equal amounts of technology and humanity. And I think that was a big takeaway from this conference as well, which is, as I said, don't hide behind technology. You can't. How do you scale humanity? Well, you don't do it by automating intimacy. You do it by finding the balance between humanity and automation, if you will.
Yes, absolutely. I interviewed CEO Mark Organ of Influitive on the first day, and he talked about AdvoCamp, the goal behind the conference being to create a category. So this is not a user group conference, which is typical for companies like his. He wants to create a category, and he almost likened it to Tesla and what they're doing with electric cars, where they're openly sharing data with competitors and information because they want to build a category. He wants to build a category around advocate marketing. Do you think that can work, or like, what do you make of this? Because marketing, there's so much push towards the marketing suite, and one size fits all, and buy your marketing solution. I won't pick on any vendors in particular. Do you think this can succeed as a discrete sort of category?
I mean, the only thing I would say to that is, why hasn't it been done before? And the great ideas are those. I was saying to Jay as well, Jay Bear, who just wrote Hug Your Haters. I was like, I can't believe no one's written a book about that before. We've always spoken about it, which is, I mean, we turn a customer around, customer service, etc. But the great ideas are so simple in terms of looking at it and go, wow, that's so simple. I could have come up with it. And then you follow that up with a, damn, why didn't I think of that? And so, creating a category. I mean, my day job is connecting startups and brands, and
Right.
and from an innovation standpoint, being able to, ask these simple questions, which is, well, what if Kodak acquired Instagram? Might they have survived? Or what if Blockbuster had invested in Netflix?
Yeah.
Why aren't brands with $500 billion of marketing not realizing that they themselves, could outspend the entire venture capital, community with their Super Bowl commercials, so to speak. So, the simplicity, the creating the category. I mean, that's what we're trying to do: create a category that says brands, have a right to play in the technology space. In the B2B space, we're seeing it with the rise of MarTech. So, in the B2B space, we're seeing it with the rise of account-based marketing and focusing on key accounts. So advocacy, absolutely, from a B2B standpoint, is and should be in that top three, if not number one, in terms of priorities.
So I guess that would be a yes.
That would be a resounding yes. And as I said, why hasn't it been done sooner? So first sell the category and then sell yourselves.
Well, the amount of attendees are growing dramatically every year, so we may not be stuck in this room for too long.
And unbelievable keynotes, truth be told. I mean,
Right.
present company excluded. They kind of, they must have won a booby prize by getting me. But wow, like Dan Ariely and Keith Ferrazzi and Daniel Pink, etc.
Well, we can't praise Daniel Pink yet. He might fall on his face. He hasn't delivered his keynote
Yeah,
yet.
it's true. He's going to deliver the campaign that says, why Mike Huckabee was the perfect, and be like, I don't think so. Well, yeah, I will say it's been kind of, interesting how we've, politics has been a common theme and a thread.
Right.
I mean, Mark spoke about ISIS, and so,
We've been able to do it without killing each other either, which is
yeah,
good.
I'm pretty sure the NSA is swooping down on us as we speak. But I mean, it's been interesting times to kind of, because this is the conversation that has got us all enthralled at the moment, and to draw parallels and and connections, I think is kind of key. And so this is a great group of people. I am classically a B2C marketer. But it's been a really great journey for me to embrace or be embraced by the B2B community, just like customer service. I mean, what right did I have to start talking about CRM and IVR and, and the whole business? But I think sometimes the industry needs ignoramuses, that can, because
and jesters and fools. And,
I guess I think I'm probably equal parts. But, if you think about this as a kind of a takeaway, that maybe 80% of the problem is we're too close to everything. We're so engrossed and sucked into the minutia of our day-to-day, putting out fires, unread emails, politics, dysfunction, that we absolutely don't see the forest for the trees. Use a whole a whole camping analogy. And so the perspective that comes from taking a step back, by being objective, by sometimes bringing in an outsider or even a child to go, wait, why does the funnel get smaller? It makes all the difference. The innocence and the naivety, on the one hand, causes us to realize how stupid we are and how imbecilic, we act. The other thing is, coming to an event like this allows us to recharge and invigorate and almost rededicate ourselves to what it is we do and why we got into the business in the first place. At least I hope it does.
Right. So in the camping analogy, is Trump the bear?
Trump
disrupting the campsite.
Yeah, Trump is the grizzly bear, and I'm just going to make sure my innards are still inside when he's finished with me.
But you make a point, because I think the politics.
This is the star of the movie, of The Revenant.
Well, true that too. The politics outside that are using the same dynamics we're talking about here to energize communities. It creates kind of a jugular sort of sense that the world is changing, but in a very profound way, but that it also, in a more focused way, we can apply this to our business success. So it's kind of interesting to draw those connections.
Oh, I completely agree. And what it is a microcosm it's a bubble in of itself. I don't mean a bubble as in a bubble bursting, but it's so self-contained. It has a term, it has a life. One wins, one loses. One turns around and says, well, paid media worked well for us. And the other one goes, paid media, is the most worthless investment we ever made because we lost. And so I completely agree and of course the politics of politics, versus the politics of business, with spin, with PR, with, saying one thing but doing another thing. So the parallels are unbelievable and incredible. And it's allowed us more, and most importantly, to your point, which I think is a fantastic one, the disruption. Now people are talking about the rise of a new party. We talk about our resistance to change and our inability to change. We look, in this country, I may have a funny accent, but I am an American citizen, in case people are going, what the hell, what right does he have to talk about this? But we go back and we live in the past, and we cling to our Constitution. But ultimately, as many comedians have pointed out, when we talk about amendments, they're called amendments, right? You realize that they were amendments to the Constitution.
Right.
But the point is, the real important point is change and disruption. And so from chaos comes order. From complete tumult and turmoil and chaos comes maybe a better sort of evolution. That's why I called my company Evolution.
Right.
Because, I sometimes end my presentations with this idea, which is, how do you kill a dinosaur? The answer is you don't. Evolution does.
Right. Well, that's an optimistic note. Before we wrap, I do want to let
not if you're a dinosaur.
Well, right. Yeah, I guess, are we the dinosaurs in this analogy?
I don't know. Dinosaurs, bears, campfires, mixed metaphors.
I do want to give you a chance to finish a shameless plug time around your company. Why did you start this company, and what do you do?
Well, I started Evolution because I just saw this incredible business opportunity for companies to become more agile, to become more entrepreneurial, to maximize the potential of technology, digital, social, mobile, emerging technology, and specifically how, by collaborating with early stage startups. So again, the idea of what if Kodak acquired Instagram, might they have survived? But it's allowing brands to find their startup soulmates and startups to find their brand soulmates, and truly creating a win-win between Madison Avenue and Mountain View, between startups and brands, between marketing and technology. And so
would your company essentially function sort of as an agent role?
Yeah, we're kind of agent, matchmaker, consultants. Okay. But the idea is, what we do in essence is to connect leading brands with early stage startups to solve real business problems. So that's the important phrase, not just because it's the next big thing or a bright and shiny object or a fad or a meat market now. It's to absolutely solve real business problems, and brands have real business problems in terms of resonance, relevance, awareness, perception, advocacy, conversion, community, the hardening of customers, and the resistance to traditional forms of marketing. So for me, the problems are mounting up on the brand side. And it's a cliche, but insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. This is a different approach that has to achieve a different, substantial, profound result, and that's what we do.
Excellent. Before we wrap, I should probably give a brief shout out, Mitch Joel, if you've made it to the end of this podcast. Mitch is sort of the reason I know about you, because I listened to some of your podcasts, yes, on my iPod, and you actually got Mitch into podcasting. So the legend goes, he might deny it now.
No, I mean, Mitch got himself into podcasting. He approached me to be a guest co-host or permanent co-host. And I was like, dude, just go do it yourself. And he did. And 6 Pixels is truly a, breathtaking and a best in class podcast brand. His work is, I often say the student has become the teacher, and he's just fantastic. So, this was one of the easiest things in the world, which is he has such a great voice and a clear voice and a strategic voice. And he's inspired so many people.
And a fussy intellectual curiosity to get at the little nits that are so important in conversation.
Well, I love our debates now. Yeah. Mitch and I, we try and do about one a month now together. And, enjoying the conversation, I defined conversation is between 2 or more sides, not 2 or more people. So debate is so important. I almost, if I stand on stage and I'm just preaching to the choir and I'm just telling them what they want to hear and telling them stuff they already know, I'm a waste of space. What's the point if I'm not challenging them to be better, to be smarter, to get away from out of their comfort zones? That's what Mitch and I do when we have these monthly debates, is we argue. Sometimes we're being devil's advocate. Sometimes I'm just taking the opposite side because otherwise, to
be an insufferable prick or whatever. And
that's Mitch. I'm not, I'm no,
absolutely.
I'm, just an absolute darling to everyone.
The clash of ideas, right?
Clash of clans.
That's what people want to hear.
No, and it's, we always end up probably like back on the same page. So that's why we keep doing it.
Okay, one final question. I was noticing that you don't produce as much video and audio content as you once did. Have you become disillusioned with those mediums, or is it just because your day job is a big time thing?
No, I've literally just been too busy, and
you're scaring me for a little bit there, because I'm big into media, so I get scared when people back off.
Look, I started blogging and podcasting in 2005. I still have my blog. I still have Jaffe Juice TV. I still have my podcast. I just don't have the time at the moment with everything going on. And but you know what? I served my role and my purpose, which is also to be earlier on that other people have followed, and to be able to do. That's why I will never say no to something like this. That's why I still do it with Mitch. It's just it takes a lot of time. Like, absolutely. I mean, your rig is a professional rig. I've almost taken the opposite approach, which is I'll just take up my iPhone and say, all right, let's just start recording. In a sense, but then you have to upload it and export it and import it, and so no. Much respect to everyone doing it. And listen, I do a lot of running. And I listen to marketing podcasts while I run. The amount of times and the amount of countries I've been in where I've heard my name mentioned on a podcast, sometimes completely randomly, and I just smile, and I'm running in Buenos Aires, and someone's talking on the Beancast about Joe Jaffe, who said this, and I think wow, isn't it amazing? Here I am at the bottom of the world, so to speak, at the opposite side of the world, or Sydney, I'm running past the Sydney Opera House and I hear my name, and it's like I wish there was a way that people like Mitch, for example, when he hears this, assuming he does, that your ears start ringing or turning red or feeling very warm to know that someone so far away and maybe 3 months later has been touched by you.
Right.
Podcasting is so intimate and so special in that way.
Well, I'll send him a ping with a timestamp so he doesn't have to listen to the whole thing.
Yeah, just lead him,
the
spoon
meat.
feed him. He's a busy executive.
Well, that's a good note to end on. Thanks for your time.
It was my pleasure.
Take care.